And so, friends, the Christ candle is lit as a simple, powerful, and enduring symbol of presence, of coming to see things in a different light, and of being on a path that needs light for us to follow. Today we wear orange to remember and honor all of the Indigenous children who went to residential schools. We wear orange and we pray for the residential school and intergenerational survivors who are still struggling. We wear orange and we are grateful for those who speak the truth and who work to shine a light on injustice. Today we wear orange in the name of compassion and the spirit of truth and of reconciliation. And I invite you to join me as we acknowledge the land on which we gather. Today, we walk the path of faith, a land that is sacred, a place of gathering and source of food and shelter and spiritual connection for the many Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. Within thousands of years, we are learning to respect the long history of stewardship and relationship with the land and its creatures that is shared among the Huron-Wendat, the Petun, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We have a long way to go, but we are working to learn how to live in right relations with them and with the land. So greetings on this last Sunday in September, on the eve of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is Tuesday. It's good to have you here as we reflect together on words and music and moments of quiet. These times for gathering among ourselves here in this space as Bloor Street, across the street from our place of ministry and spirit for nearly 140 years, have been important times for this community, for conversation, for discernment in the transition work that we're doing together.
It was the end of life as it was known in Jerusalem and in all the world that was left of David's monarchy. It was, for all intents and purposes, the end of the world. At least that is what it must have felt like. All the residents had been forcibly taken to Babylon from Jerusalem. Their temple had been razed and looted, the chief priest taken hostage, and almost everyone else exiled or killed. The surviving elders, priests, and prophets were all in Babylon. The religious establishment was disbanded, traumatized. Jeremiah was never part of that establishment. He was an outsider, a prophet. To the terrified and shell-shocked exiles in Babylon, the prophet Jeremiah sends a pastoral letter. Jeremiah was in a position to send this letter because he was left behind in the deportations. The people yearn to hear a word from Jeremiah that their calamity will end soon. And as the letter goes on, there are words from God of a future filled with hope. The trouble is, prophets aren't in the business of simply telling people what they want to hear. Prophets are in the business of telling people the truth. So Jeremiah outlines for the people that their future hope lies on the other side of an extended time of learning from which they will emerge changed. The reading is from Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 1 to 14. The prophet Jeremiah sent a letter from Jerusalem to the few surviving elders among the exiles, to the priests and the prophets, and to all the people that had been taken to Babylon from Jerusalem. The God of Israel proclaims to all the exiles, I have carried off from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Cultivate gardens and eat what they produce. Get married and have children. Then help your sons find wives and your daughters find husbands, in order that they too may have children. Increase in number there so that you don't dwindle away. Promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because your future depends on its welfare. The Lord proclaims, when Babylon's 70 years are up, I will come and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. I know the plans I have in mind for you, declares the Lord. They are plans for peace, not disaster, to give you a future filled with hope. When you call me and come and pray to me, I will listen to you. When you search for me, yes, search for me with all your heart, you will find me. I will be present for you, declares the Lord, and I will end your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have scattered you, and I will bring you home after your long exile, declares the Lord. In these readings, we hear God's voice. God is still speaking. Thanks be to God.
So some of you might be thinking by now, having glimpsed that title at the top of the order of service, A New Beginning, it's really unfortunate that Mary Ellen obviously was given the wrong text to read this morning, because Jeremiah is many things, but buoyant, forward-looking spirit, as conveyed by words like a new beginning, does not leap to mind as being one of the descriptors of Jeremiah. And yet the passage from Jeremiah does make its way in due course to hope, and to a line that frequently is quoted out of context. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for peace, not disaster, to give you a future filled with hope. These plans sound like good news, and they will be, and they come about through a time of transformation, the cultivation of a whole new relationship with God, a new understanding of God's ways in the world that only comes with time. So, Jeremiah. At the beginning of the book that bears his name, God proclaims that Jeremiah is appointed over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. And in Jeremiah 29, we see that come true. The people of Jerusalem have been violently uprooted, their cities, their homes destroyed, the end of the world as they knew it. It's 586 before the Common Era, and the vast armies of Babylon besieged Jerusalem, breached the city walls. They burned down every building, in particular the temple. They killed government officials, the political and religious leadership, and deported any of the remaining elite, and left the poor to fend for themselves on what was left of the land amidst famine and disease. The puppet king who was left behind, Zedekiah, consulted Jeremiah. Is there any word from the Lord? Yes, said Jeremiah, there was a word from the Lord. Don't fool yourself. Don't listen to the reckless lies and the false dreams of your sycophants. This is the end of the end. And then Jeremiah wrote a letter to the prisoners of war who'd been exiled to Babylon. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So there is the first shock. The exile and defeat was God's doing. God takes responsibility. And with exile, the geography of salvation changed. For the ancient Hebrews, the destruction of Jerusalem and deportation to Babylon was beyond comprehension. Where were God's mighty acts of power? How could God surrender them to a far distant enemy? The people who survived the forced march across deserts were sure that God had abandoned them forever. Because the ancient understanding was that one's God was tied to one's land. And they were no longer in the land where their God dwelled. God had not been strong enough to secure them in the land, so God is clearly absent. They've been abandoned. In their despair, the people would have clung to the words of prophets who, claiming they were from God, told them what they wanted to hear, how God would rescue them from their desolation and return the people home. But Jeremiah is clear that these words are not from God. They proclaim a false hope. God carried them into exile. God will return them in time. Why the delay? The people have suffered. The land is ruined. The rebuilding will take a generation, so they will not easily forget this experience. Why not just guide them safely back home? What's standing in the way? God is seeking the transformation of the people for a truly renewed and a truly hopeful future. And God knows that this will come through a process of conversion, of learning, that involves things that people would do anything to avoid if they could. Jeremiah's letter sketches these elements of conversion and transformation efficiently, and you can almost imagine the people calculating how much time this is adding up to, horrified as the number rises. Build houses and settle down. Well, it's going to take months, even for some modest dwellings. Cultivate gardens and eat what they produce. Well, that takes 2 or 3 growing seasons to till the earth, work in compost, and begin rotating crops so there's a decent yield. We're up to 3 or 4 years already. Get married, have children. Well, with time to find a partner, to settle, to then try and get pregnant, to bring a child into the world and for them to grow, we're looking at, 15, 16 years. Then help your children to find partners and settle them into life together, to finally bring forth grandchildren. And then to increase in number, aiming at population growth. We're looking at generations and generations here. And then a real clincher: promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Your very future depends on its welfare. Pray for the well-being of the capital city of your conquerors, of those who subjugate you. So God does the math, but the people already have a number. When Babylon's 70 years, 70 are up, I will come and fulfill my promise to take you back to this place. But the people who eventually go back to Jerusalem, they will not be the people who went into exile. They will be their descendants, and they will be changed by the experience of this time. We now know that the exile was a time when huge changes came to the Jewish faith. They discovered that God was not, in fact, tied to the land, and they could pray to God in far-off Babylon, and God would hear them. When you call me and come and pray to me, I will listen to you. I will be present for you. Well, God is bigger than they'd ever imagined. Not some tribal deity of some backwards land called Judah, but universal. God of the whole world. And then they gradually come to realize God is the creator of all that is. From there, they began to write down the creation stories that we know in Genesis and the history of the peoples who through history had come to know God better in surprising ways. In Babylon, they wrote down the wisdom of the sages, the poetry of the Psalms, the stories of their prophets, the yearning of the people for a relationship with God. It all got put down in writing for the first time. And that took time. And it bore witness to the transformation that happened in the course of 70 years. As contemplatives of most faith traditions know, the spaces where human transformation happens are difficult ones of self-denial, self-emptying, loss of control, failure. These are the human spaces of transformation and growth, not through the things we prefer, like success, accomplishment, and wealth. As Richard Rohr, who writes a fair bit about these things, describes it in one of his weekly reflections, true liberation is letting go of our small self, letting go of our cultural biases, letting go of our fear of loss and death. Freedom is letting go of wanting more and better things. And it's letting go of our need to control and manipulate God and other people. It is even letting go of our need to know and our need to be right, all of which we only discover with maturity. The path of descent, as Rohr calls it, of letting go, of loss of control, is the essence of all that Jesus taught about transformation too. Renewal, learning, the cultivation of our deepest humanity and our hope for the world, and the growth that leads to those things is most often triggered by some sort of falling experience that challenges our established worldview. And Rohr believes that this falling is not just inevitable, but necessary for spiritual growth. It's in facing our failings with our imperfections that we become fully human. I hope we're discovering this a bit as we do the work of transformation and transition as Bloor Street. The complexity of the construction, the building systems, the interlocking pieces of what's taking shape across the street are nothing compared to the intricate design and growth that shapes the transformation of a community of people like us, certainly like me. God's plan for peace to give us a future filled with hope takes shape in myriad steps, insights, interactions, and gleanings that come as we walk God's way of transformation and renewal, patiently, slowly, but also sustainably. It becomes deeply rooted in us. As the 20th century theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said, "Nothing worth doing can be accomplished in a single lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope." And the work that God calls the people to do during this transformative time also signals a mandate, I think, for us today. Seek the welfare of the city. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare, your well-being. It is, in effect, the job description, the mission statement, and the strategic plan for every city church, every urban church. The city is important. It is precious. Seek the welfare of the city. Pray for the city's welfare is joined with your well-being. In his 2007 book, Mandate to Difference, an Invitation to the Contemporary Church, Walter Brueggemann observes that the city occupies a complex place in Christianity, and that much of the Protestant tradition has been suspicious of and resistant towards the city. In the 1960s, many downtown churches sold their property and relocated to the relative safety and stability of the suburbs, not Bloor Street. Bloor Street made a decision to stay downtown even after the fire in 1954 gave the perfect opportunity to close down and rebuild elsewhere. We realize today, I hope, that the church must not abandon the city geographically or spiritually, theologically or missionally. It is in the city, after all, where human life is most intense, with its universities and hospitals, where the markets are and the banks, where wealth is earned and accumulated and invested and flaunted. Cities are where information is gathered and disseminated through media outlets of all kinds, where art flourishes in museums and orchestras and architecture. The city is where human power and weakness are on display, greed and benevolence, corruption and altruism. Not everyone loves the city. Some people are overwhelmed by it and can't wait to leave the traffic, the congestion, the noise, the crime, the slums, and homeless people. And it is easy to romanticize the city when you are privileged. But the city is a hard place for an unemployed single mother. For some people, the city is the sum of all that's wrong with the human condition: greed, violence, corruption, poverty, and despair. But it's hard to be more of a city church than Bloor Street United. We are and will be a city church located in one of the most urban neighborhoods in the largest metropolitan area in Canada and the fourth largest in North America, and that includes Mexico. Far from being sheltered, we should be and we will be in the forefront of change in society, celebrating the new ways that spirituality and religious practice is finding new expression in our world, and investing in that work as a part of our own transformation in our waiting. And that's what we find so challenging about all this. We who want to get at the doing of good, the fixing of things, the betterment of lives, all of which is good and valued and important, we have a hard time with waiting. In their book, When Church Stops Working, the Canadian theologian Blair Bertrand and the US theologian Andrew Root focus on the birth of the early church in waiting. Jesus told the disciples to go back to Jerusalem and to do one thing: wait together. In their waiting, they are to pray, to eat together, to tell stories, to remember, and to anticipate. In the waiting, they will have a new experience of the living God as Spirit. And they do wait for a time, but then go-getters like Peter get antsy. And that's a whole other story on its own in Acts. But in Babylon and in Jerusalem and here in Toronto, we need to wait, to allow ourselves to not be in control. It's hard. There is so much to do. But there's also much to do in being together, in sharing food, in praying and praying for the peace and well-being of the city around us. We too have work that is preparing us for what is to come, a plan for our peace, our well-being, for hope. No, Jeremiah's letter does not at first sound much like a new beginning, but it outlines the contours of God's fresh initiative for the Jewish people. And we have a truly astonishing offer of joining with God's fresh initiative for us as a community of faith in this dynamic and changing city of ours. Reading Jeremiah's letter truly is a testament of transformation and of hope, though not an easy hope. The Jewish people finally returning to the land knew that then, at that point, was when the real work would begin. So too for us, when that building across the street is ready for us and we are ready to fill it with life and spirit, that is when the real work will begin, that we have been preparing for in ways that we might not fully grasp at the moment. In retrospect, I believe we'll come to see that this was all a vital part of our journey to know God anew for a changed and changing world, a new beginning. May it be so. Amen.